the bustling concourse of Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. Flight announcements echoing overhead, and a swirl of passengers rushing to reach their gates. Among them stands Darius Jackson, a bright, ambitious Morehouse College student, clutching a coveted first-class ticket on an American Airlines flight to Seattle. Tension crackles in the air as sideways glances and curious whispers follow him through the VIP lounge, prompting an unsettling question. Does he truly belong in first class? He has every right to be there yet. Trouble is brewing. What if the biggest obstacle to soaring toward his future isn't turbulence, but the very people meant to get him there? Darius Jackson woke before dawn, nerves buzzing in his stomach. It was only his second time flying, yet he found himself in possession of something extraordinary, a first-class ticket. He'd earned it through the generosity of a private scholarship program, one that recognized his outstanding work at Morehouse College in Atlanta. With the scholarship came perks access to an exclusive mentorship event in Seattle, a gleaming gold ticket for first-class travel, and the promise of connections that could catapult his dreams into reality. Hartsfield-Jackson. Atlanta International Airport greeted him with a rush of bodies and the smell of fresh coffee. Eager travelers lugged suitcases, parents tugged the hands of excited children, and business executives typed furiously on phones as they wove through lines. Darius had arrived earlier than needed, allowing him time to soak in the experience. Truthfully, he'd never set foot in the first-class lounge before, but he had read about it online. Plush seating, complimentary drinks, a quiet respite from the cacophony of the main terminal. This was a world that felt surreal to him, a young man from a modest upbringing. The lounge's doors parted silently at his approach. Inside, soft lighting revealed elegant furniture and an attendant behind a polished counter. Wearing his Sunday best slacks, a crisp button-down and a Morehouse tie, Darius still felt eyes upon him. The lounge had a scattering of travelers, an older gentleman in a tailored suit sipping espresso, a woman in a chic business dress leafing through a magazine, and two more corporate types speaking in hushed tones. Immediately, Darius noticed the stares, some subtle, others less so. He offered a polite nod and made his way to an empty seat near the corner. He couldn't shake the feeling of being out of place, but he knew he had every right to be here. That was what his mother always told him. No matter where you are, you belong if you've worked for it. He reminded himself of that as he dug his phone from his pocket to recheck the flight details. American Airlines flight AA1329 from Atlanta to Seattle. Departure time 8:30 a.m. He had never been so excited or terrified. The mentorship event in Seattle was part of a special leadership program. Industry giants would be there, executives from Microsoft, Boeing, and other major corporations. Such an opportunity didn't come often, and Darius intended to make the most of it. He'd prepared meticulously, assembling resumes, personal statements, and a well-rehearsed elevator pitch. He was determined to show everyone that brilliance, resilience, and creativity could come from anywhere, even a humble neighborhood in Atlanta. But as he sipped the lemon-infused water served in the lounge, Darius couldn't know that this day would test him more than any other. Forces were already set into motion, from prejudiced whispers to the complexities of airline logistics that would push him far beyond his comfort zone. And somewhere beyond the horizon, destiny waited, ready to reveal that this entire flight depended on him more than anyone realized. At Gate B12, the boarding process began in typical fashion. First class and premium flyers were invited to line up. Darius clutched his small carry-on shoulders, squared as he walked up to the podium. Despite the agent's forced smile, he caught a moment of hesitation when she scanned his boarding pass, eyes flicking between the pass and his face. After a second or two, that felt much longer, the beep sounded and he was waved forward. Inside the aircraft, the plush first-class seats glistened in the morning light. Large cushioned chairs with ample legroom promised a relaxed journey across the country. Darius located his seat 1A, a prime window seat. Placing his bag in the overhead bin, he eased himself into the chair, marveling at the comfort. A flight attendant, tall with neatly pulled-back blonde hair, approached him with a warm, if somewhat mechanical smile. "Good morning, sir," she said. "Can I get you something to drink? Orange juice, perhaps? Coffee?" He smiled back, swallowing a sudden lump in his throat. "I'd love some orange juice, thank you." As she walked away, he glanced around the cabin. Most of his fellow first-class passengers were busy with laptops, newspapers, or simply settling in. Only one person seemed to stare at him, a middle-aged man in a sharp business suit across the aisle. The man's expression was unreadable, but Darius felt a pang of discomfort. Was it curiosity, suspicion? Perhaps both. When the flight attendant returned with orange juice, the man quietly beckoned her over. Darius couldn't hear their exchange, but the man's body language gave away his discontent. Pointed gestures, a tight-lipped frown, and an occasional glance in Darius's direction. The attendant's expression shifted from confusion to awkward politeness. Somehow Darius felt that conversation was about him. True enough, within minutes, the flight attendant returned to his row, her earlier warmth replaced with a somewhat cooler tone. "Could I see your boarding pass, please?" she asked politely. "Sure," Darius replied, brow furrowing. He retrieved the slip from his pocket and handed it over. Her eyes flickered from the ticket to the passenger manifest on her tablet. She nodded slowly. "Everything seems to be in order," she said, a hesitant smile returning to her face. "Sorry for the inconvenience." "No worries," Darius said, but his heart pounded. He'd done nothing wrong. Why was this happening? The man across the aisle muttered something under his breath and leaned back in his seat, crossing his arms. Darius told himself not to dwell on it, reminding himself that prejudice, whether subtle or overt, would always find a way to rear its head. He was determined not to let it get under his skin. But events were about to escalate far beyond a tense, silent stare-down. Passengers continued streaming in, and soon the entire first-class cabin was nearly full. The lead flight attendant, a woman named Christina, came on the intercom to greet everyone, detailing the estimated flight time and welcoming them aboard American Airlines Flight AA1329. Then Darius heard hushed voices from the galley near the front of the plane. Glancing over, he saw Christina speaking with the tall, blonde attendant who'd served him orange juice. Both occasionally darted eyes toward him. His stomach tightened. A few minutes later, Christina approached with a forced smile. "Sir, could I have a quick word?" Heart thumping. Darius unbuckled his seatbelt and stood. Several of the other first-class passengers turned their heads at the commotion, including the man in the suit. Darius stepped into the narrow galley, the scent of brewing coffee and warm pastries filling the cramped space. Christina cleared her throat. "We have a bit of a seating issue," she said gently. "It seems there might be an overbooking in first class. Sometimes the system automatically upgrades certain frequent flyers. Could I see your boarding pass and ID, just to verify that everything is correct?" He handed over both without hesitation, aware of how easily misunderstandings about tickets could escalate. Anxiety sparked in his mind. Was it truly a computer glitch, Or was the plane overbooked? Or was something else at play? Christina studied his documents for what felt like ages. Then she handed them back, wearing a tight-lipped expression. "Everything's legitimate," she said quietly. "But we do have a passenger who insists this seat is his. He's an elite-level frequent flyer." "But I have the ticket," Darius replied, trying to keep his voice calm. "I booked it weeks ago. And it's not an upgrade. It was part of a scholarship package." "I understand, sir. Unfortunately, in these situations, we're encouraged to see if volunteers can move to another seat so that our frequent flyer can remain happy." His pulse quickened. "So you want me to move to Coach Christina?" Hesitated, then said, "We'd be able to compensate you with miles or possibly a voucher." "I'm sorry, but no." Darius interrupted gently but firmly. "I paid for this seat, or rather, my scholarship did. And I need to be in Seattle rested and ready for an important event. With respect, this is not just a joyride for me." Christina gave a short nod. "I understand. Let me speak to the passenger again." He returned to his seat, a swirl of emotion coursing through him. Heads turned his way, and he hated feeling like a spectacle. Why did he have to stand up for his right to occupy a seat he'd already paid for? When Christina returned, she wore a conflicted expression. "Sir, could I have you step off the plane for a moment, so we can sort this out at the gate?" Darius stiffened. "But why do I need to step off the plane?" "My ticket is valid." She didn't meet his eyes. "It's a standard procedure. The other passenger is making quite a fuss. We just want to clear this up peacefully. We'll have you board again if all is well." Anger, fear, and frustration pulsed through him, but mindful of the stares around him, he decided to comply, without a scene. He carefully gathered his carry-on, glancing at the man across the aisle who wore a smug expression. As Darius made his way toward the exit, he could almost feel the weight of prejudice pressing down on him. He wanted to call his mother to speak words of comfort, but time was short. Outside in the jetway, a gate agent waited with a stern face. What he couldn't know was that this confrontation was about to spiral into something far bigger than he'd ever anticipated. "Sir, I understand you have a first-class ticket." The gate agent, whose name tag read Trevor, began in a clipped tone. "But we need to confirm your purchase method, the seat assignment, and I've already shown my ticket and my ID," Darius replied. His voice wavered slightly with suppressed frustration. "I have the scholarship documentation here on my phone, if that helps." Trevor sighed, checking his computer. "We have a passenger who's claiming he's been assigned your seat through his frequent flyer program. That passenger is extremely high status with American Airlines. He's threatening a complaint if we don't resolve this immediately." Darius's temper flared. "Am I not considered a paying customer too? Is his status more important than my seat?" "I'm not at liberty to comment on that," Trevor replied, clearly uncomfortable. "We're simply trying to follow the protocol here. Overbooking sometimes happens, or seats might accidentally be double assigned." "I understand that mistakes happen," Darius said. "But I checked in well in advance, and it's not my fault if the seat got double booked. I shouldn't be punished for it." He stood his ground. Trevor typed furiously into the computer, each keystroke echoing in the near-empty jetway. Occasionally the gate agent frowned, muttered under his breath, and cross-referenced a printout. Meanwhile, the tall, blonde flight attendant stepped into the jetway, eyeing Darius with an unreadable gaze. Time dragged on. 5 minutes felt like an eternity, especially with the knowledge that the flight was scheduled to depart soon. Darius swallowed, imagining the embarrassment of missing his flight due to a bureaucratic tangle or worse, blatant discrimination. Then the unexpected happened. Christina. The lead flight attendant hurried down the jetway. Her eyes flicked between Trevor and the blonde attendant before she addressed Darius. "Sir, we're truly sorry for the inconvenience. Please come back on board. We have your seat waiting for you. We're finalizing the arrangement with the other passenger." His heart soared with relief, though uncertainty lingered. "So everything's settled?" Christina nodded. "Yes, please come back. We've assured the passenger that your seat is rightfully yours." Darius released a long breath, hoping that was the end of it. He mustered a polite "thank you" and followed Christina back into the plane bag in tow. The blonde attendant cast him a tight, almost begrudging smile, but said nothing. Inside the cabin was tense. Every gaze seemed riveted on him as he made his way back to seat 1A. The man in the suit had disappeared. Darius caught a glimpse of him further back in the plane, gesturing wildly at another flight attendant. A few more minutes passed in anxious stillness. Then the passenger in question, the man in the suit, stormed back up to first class. "This is outrageous," he barked, ignoring the hush that fell over the rest of the cabin. "I've been an executive platinum member for 10 years. I was promised an upgrade. Christina approached, stepping between him and Darius's seat. "Sir, I understand your frustration, but we do not have another seat available in first class." This gentleman's seat was confirmed upon booking. The man huffed, glancing over at Darius with scorn. "And who is he anyway? I've never heard of a last-minute scholarship seat." "Ridiculous." Darius tried to remain composed, though his face burned. The man's hostility was painfully obvious. Sir Darius began. "I'm a scholarship recipient flying to Seattle for an educational program. My seat is legitimate." "I don't care," the man snapped, pointing a finger. "I will not be treated like this. I spend tens of thousands of dollars with this airline each year." The entire cabin froze. Some passengers craned their necks to watch the spectacle. Others pretended to ignore it, but listened keenly. Darius could sense the flight attendant's tension, the simmering rage of the man, and the awkwardness of everyone else. "Sir, if you can't settle down, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the aircraft," Christina said, her voice calm but firm. "You'll be hearing from my lawyers." The man spat. With that, he turned, seized his carry-on, and stomped down the aisle. Another flight attendant followed him, presumably to ensure he actually deplaned. Darius eased back into his seat, chest heaving with adrenaline. He felt eyes on him, some sympathetic, some curious, some even resentful. He tried to remind himself that not all the stares were negative. Some people might simply be shocked by the outburst, but a knot of anxiety lodged in his stomach refused to settle. "All right, folks, we apologize for the delay," Christina announced on the PA system. "We will be closing the aircraft door shortly and departing for Seattle." Though her tone was cheerful, the tension still crackled in the air. Darius exhaled, telling himself that the worst was over. Yet the reality was quite the opposite. The plane pushed back from the gate, and flight attendants began their safety demonstrations. Darius tried to focus on the routine announcements, forcing his mind to calm. He gazed out the window, taking in the movement of ground crew and the distant runway. Something about watching planes roar into the sky both excited him and filled him with trepidation. Within minutes, the aircraft trundled toward the runway. Then came the dreaded pause. Darius glanced around, noticing the plane had come to a stop on the taxiway. The captain came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing a slight technical issue with one of our onboard systems. We need to return to the gate for a quick check by maintenance. We apologize for the inconvenience." A collective groan rippled through the cabin. People shifted murmured complaints about missed connections and delayed arrivals. Darius couldn't help but wonder if this day could get any more stressful. Back at the gate, the door opened once more, and a few ground crew members stepped aboard, exchanging hushed words with the flight attendants. Meanwhile, the man who'd made a scene earlier was nowhere to be seen, likely escorted out of the secure area. Then came another surprising twist. A different airline representative boarded heading straight to first class. He was a tall, broad-shouldered man named Mitchell, sporting an American Airlines blazer and a polite but slightly frantic expression. He leaned down and spoke to Darius in a hushed voice. "Mr. Jackson, correct?" "Yes," Darius replied, heart pounding. "I'm with the ground operations team. We've encountered an unusual situation. Can I speak with you in the galley for a moment?" A sinking feeling blossomed in Darius's gut. Of course. He followed Mitchell to the galley, noticing how the flight attendants looked on warily. When they were semi-secluded, Mitchell cleared his throat. "We understand that you're traveling on a scholarship ticket. We also see that you're scheduled to make a connecting flight from Seattle to Anchorage tomorrow on a different airline." "Is that correct?" Darius blinked. "Yes, that's part of the program itinerary. There's a company tour in Seattle first, and then we're heading up to Alaska for a research project." "Why do you ask?" Mitchell inhaled sharply. "Well, apparently the passenger who left in a rage filed a complaint claiming this entire situation was a security risk." "A security risk?" Darius repeated, astonished. "How so?" "He alleged that your ticket was somehow fraudulent, among other baseless accusations." Mitchell looked apologetic. "We had the TSA do a quick verification. They want to see you again before we close up for good." Darius felt dizzy. "You can't be serious. I've already cleared security and proven my seat is legitimate." "I know, sir. It's just that once a complaint is lodged, especially with certain trigger phrases, the airline and TSA have to do due diligence. However, we have reason to believe everything will check out just fine." Tension thrummed in Darius's temples. "I have an important event to attend. This is not just a pleasure trip for me. I assure you we're doing everything we can. If everything is in order, we'll get you back on this plane immediately, even if we have to hold it a few extra minutes." Darius exhaled, head spinning. "Fine. Let's get it over with." He snagged his carry-on bag once again, feeling the weight of 1,000 stares as he moved toward the exit. He half expected another wave of scorn from the passengers, but instead, most just looked concerned, perhaps even sympathetic. And so for the second time that morning, Darius found himself stepping off the plane. Somewhere deep within, he wondered if he would ever get to Seattle at this rate. Back at the gate, Darius stepped into a scene that felt like a surreal interrogation room staged in public. 2 Transportation Security Administration agents, a man and a woman, stood stiffly by the counter, with unreadable expressions. Their presence was a stark reminder that even after proving his identity and legitimacy, he was still being viewed as a potential threat. Trevor, the gate agent from earlier, lingered nearby, arms crossed, and eyes darting between Darius and the agents. Mitchell, the airline supervisor who had earlier shown a measure of kindness, stood just behind them, his face lined with concern. "Mr. Jackson," the male TSA agent said in a clipped voice, "we're going to need to verify your identity and reason for travel once more. Please show us your ID boarding pass and any documentation related to your ticket." Darius had already shown these documents multiple times. His jaw clenched, but he said nothing. Instead, he reached into his backpack and handed over his Georgia state ID, the first-class boarding pass, and his phone opened to the scholarship email thread. His fingers trembled slightly, not out of guilt, but sheer frustration and exhaustion. He was tired of jumping through hoops that no one else seemed to face. The female agent, younger and with kind eyes, took the documents and began examining them carefully. The male agent asked, "When did you purchase this ticket?" "It was part of a scholarship," Darius explained, trying to keep his voice steady. "I didn't buy it with a credit card. The Allen Foundation arranged it. I have the letter here." He pulled up the formal PDF on his phone with the official Morehouse College and Allen Foundation letterhead. The agent stepped aside to examine everything. Darius stood awkwardly in front of them every passing second, stretching out like hours. Other passengers began trickling toward nearby gates, casting the occasional glance in his direction. He imagined what they saw: a young black man being questioned by TSA in the middle of a busy airport. He could feel the sting of judgment, the invisible weight of assumption. Meanwhile, Mitchell leaned toward him and spoke quietly. "I'm really sorry about all this. Unfortunately, the passenger who made the complaint used specific language that triggered a security verification protocol. We're obligated to follow through even when we know it's nonsense." Darius gave a curt nod, but didn't reply. What could he say that wouldn't come out as bitter? Even now, with multiple professionals confirming his credentials, he was still being treated like a suspect. He glanced at Trevor, who looked increasingly uncomfortable, as if he were beginning to realize how wrong this was, but didn't know how to stop it. "Do you have any proof of your involvement in this mentorship program?" The female agent asked, her tone less harsh than her partner's. "Yes," Darius replied, tapping through his inbox. "Here's the welcome email from the program coordinator, the itinerary and the travel schedule." He handed over his phone again. They took a few more minutes to review everything, whispering back and forth. Darius tried not to show how deeply humiliated he felt, how angry he was at being pulled from the plane a second time. This time not because of a mistake, but because of a lie, an accusation rooted in prejudice. Finally, the female agent returned, handing back his documents. "Sir, we find no evidence of any wrongdoing. You're free to reboard." Darius exhaled, half relief, half residual fury. He nodded curtly, stuffing everything back into his bag. But before he could turn away, Mitchell gently placed a hand on his shoulder. "Mr. Jackson," he said, voice low, "I want to personally apologize. The airline does not condone profiling or harassment. A formal report will be filed about this incident, and I encourage you to submit one, too. What happened today was unacceptable." Darius looked him in the eye and replied, "Thank you. I just want to get to Seattle. That's all I've wanted all morning." Mitchell nodded. "You will, and the flight crew has already agreed to delay takeoff until you're back on board." With that, Darius slung his backpack over his shoulder and walked toward the gate. The stairs this time were different, more curious, some even sympathetic, but none of them erased the sting of what had just happened. He'd been singled out, scrutinized, and nearly sidelined, all because someone in a suit didn't like the idea of him sitting in first class. As he stepped onto the jet bridge once more, the terminal noise faded behind him. His shoes echoed in the corridor as he approached the plane. And though he felt weary and violated, a flicker of something else stirred inside him. Defiance, maybe even resolve. They tried to take his seat. They tried to take his dignity. But they failed. And Darius Jackson wasn't done yet. Would you like me to rewrite Chapter 7? Next for continuity, or expand another part of the story? After a 45-minute delay, the plane finally took off. A collective sigh of relief passed through the cabin, and Darius felt a surge of excitement. It was happening. He was on his way. Yet the morning's frustrations lingered in his mind, leaving him watchful. At cruising altitude, the flight attendants began their service. Christina personally came to Darius, bending down to speak discreetly. "How are you doing?" "Okay," he replied, thankful for her concern. "Just ready to get to Seattle." She nodded sympathetically. "We're sorry for everything that happened. If you need anything, don't hesitate to let me know." "Thank you," he said, managing a small smile. He turned his attention to his laptop, planning to review his notes for the mentorship program. The hum of the engines provided a soothing background noise, and for a while he lost himself in work. Yet as drink service began, a new wave of murmurs caught his attention. Toward the front of the first-class cabin, a different passenger. A stout older man with a receding hairline began complaining of dizziness and chest pains. Immediately the flight attendants rushed to his aid, offering oxygen and checking if any medical professionals were on board. A middle-aged woman in a floral blouse stepped forward from coach, identifying herself as a nurse. She and the flight attendants helped the man lie across a row of seats. For a tense few minutes, everything revolved around his condition. Christina asked over the intercom if there was a doctor available. None responded. Darius watched with concern. Something about the man's pained expressions made him wonder if it was more than just a dizzy spell. The nurse gave him water and asked about pre-existing conditions, medication, and so forth. The man mumbled something incoherent. Turbulence jolted the plane. The seatbelt sign dinged on. Christina and the nurse tried to steady themselves, continuing their efforts to assist the man. Then the nurse turned her face pale. "I think he might be having a heart attack. We need to land as soon as possible or get an AED." An anxious hush settled over the entire plane. People stared, some prayed quietly. Christina quickly grabbed the onboard defibrillator, AED. Passengers looked on in alarm. The nurse prepared to administer a shock, carefully reading the device's prompts. From his seat, Darius felt his chest tighten in sympathy. He prayed silently for the man's survival. The nurse pressed the AED pads against the man's chest as the device's robotic voice guided each step. Then, unbelievably, the AED began to flicker. A moment of confusion passed. The nurse tried to start it again, only for the screen to show an error message. Everyone froze. Christina cursed under her breath. "It's malfunctioning. The AED isn't working." A ripple of panic coursed through the cabin. The nurse attempted to remain calm, beginning chest compressions with grim determination. "We need a functioning AED, or we need to land," she said through labored breaths. Christina rushed to the cockpit to inform the pilots. Darius heard only muffled voices, but the tension was palpable. A medical emergency at 30,000 feet with a malfunctioning defibrillator was the worst scenario. After a few agonizing minutes, the captain announced they would divert to Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport, the nearest major airport with top-notch medical facilities. As the plane banked and began a rapid descent, the nurse continued compressions, sweat beading her brow. The flight attendant scrambled to keep the area clear and administer oxygen. The passenger's face was pallid chest moving weakly with each push. There in the midst of crisis, no one remembered the earlier friction over seats. Skin color status and personal grudges fell to the wayside. Lives were at stake, and people needed to come together. Yet fate had another twist waiting. Something that would place Darius at the center of an impossible choice. Descent felt painfully slow. The nurse kept compressions and other passengers offered assistance from holding the man's hand to fetching wet towels. The situation was dire and everyone knew it. Christina emerged from the cockpit again, looking harried. She made her way to Darius's row. "Mr. Jackson," "We need to ask you something," she said in a strained whisper. Darius blinked. "What can I do?" Her face was grim. "We have an emergency kit on board with advanced medical supplies. The kit is locked, accessible only with a special code that we must get from a doctor via telemedicine. We've tried to connect with our ground medical consultant, but there's a technical failure in the communication system. The kit remains locked, but it has potentially life-saving medication in it." Confusion knitted Darius's brow. "I understand, but what does that have to do with me?" She took a slow breath. "We found your name in a special clearance list. The scholarship you're on, apparently, it's sponsored by a major philanthropic group that has some kind of arrangement with us. That might give you advanced clearance to access certain airline equipment under unusual circumstances." Darius's mind reeled. "I don't see how. I'm just a college student. My scholarship is from the Allen Foundation, which does a lot of philanthropic work. But that wouldn't give me medical clearance." Christina's expression remained urgent. "We're not sure either, but your name is flagged for high-priority assistance, something about advanced leadership clearance. It's unusual, but the database says you could help unlock certain resources if needed. The flight deck is requesting we try your credentials on the kit's lock." Disbelief clouded Darius's thoughts. "Are you serious?" She nodded, eyes flicking toward the passenger in crisis. "This is life or death. We're about 15 minutes out from Dallas, us Fort Worth. If you can unlock that kit somehow, we might be able to administer the medication. At this point, it's worth trying." Adrenaline flooded him. This was surreal. "All right, let's try." He followed Christina to a cabinet near the front galley. The nurse pounded on the kit's casing in frustration. The lock had a digital keypad, typically opened only with a code from medical professionals. Christina showed Darius a small screen reading "Access Restricted." "Enter authorized ID. Use your boarding pass," she whispered. He scanned the barcode on his boarding pass. The screen beeped angrily. "Invalid ID." Christina bit her lip. "Try scanning your driver's license next." He did so, but it also failed. Then a flight attendant behind them said, "I just found this in the system. It says to use a special code assigned to your booking reference." Trembling with urgency, Darius brought up his smartphone, scrolling through emails from the scholarship coordinator. There an alphanumeric code labeled Allen Foundation VIP Access. He typed it into the keypad. For an agonizing second, nothing happened. Then with a soft click, the lock opened. The nurse gasped with relief. She yanked open the kit, rummaging for the medication. "Nitroglycerin spray? Aspirin? We have it," she murmured, pulling items out. Swiftly she moved to the stricken passenger's side, administering the medication as the plane continued its descent. Darius felt a swirl of disbelief, fear, and awe. How had he just unlocked something that required advanced clearance? Why had the scholarship's name triggered such an override? There were more questions than answers, but right now, all that mattered was helping the man. The nurse gave the patient aspirin and nitroglycerin, then resumed compressions. Gradually, the passenger's color improved slightly. His eyes fluttered open for a brief moment, and the nurse offered a shaky smile. Passengers let out a collective gasp of relief. But the ordeal wasn't over. They still had to land as soon as possible. The cockpit announced over the intercom, "Prepare for an emergency landing in Dallas, Fort Worth, in approximately 10 minutes. Flight attendants, please take your seats and ensure the cabin is secure." The plane descended rapidly, coming in hot for an expedited landing. Flight attendants strapped into their seats. the nurse holding on to the patient. Darius returned to 1A, hearing the landing gear thud into position beneath the cabin floor. Adrenaline coursed through everyone as the runway lights appeared below. Upon touchdown, tires screeched and the plane lurched. The pilot fought to slow the aircraft, swiftly aiming to get them to the gate where paramedics could board. Passengers clutched armrests, relieved to feel solid ground beneath them. An ambulance was already waiting on the tarmac. Once the engines powered down and the plane door opened, paramedics rushed inside with a stretcher. They carefully loaded the ailing passenger, hooking him up to oxygen and monitoring equipment. The nurse spoke quickly to them, explaining the medication given and the chest compressions. Then just as swiftly they were gone, whisking him to a waiting ambulance outside. A hush remained in the cabin, broken only by worried murmurs. Finally, the captain announced that they would have a brief ground stop to ensure the plane was still airworthy and refuel if needed. The flight would continue to Seattle as soon as they got clearance. Darius slumped in his seat, exhaustion washing over him. He replayed the bizarre sequence of events in his mind, the confrontation with the frequent flyer, the humiliating checks, the mysterious locked kit, and now this near tragedy. He felt a tap on his shoulder. It was Christina Musmotul. "Jackson, the ground operations manager wants to see you up front." He stood, limbs heavy, and made his way off the plane. On the jetway stood a woman in a crisp American Airlines suit. Her badge read, "Operations Manager Linda Harper." She extended a hand with a tense smile. "Thank you for cooperating in that crisis," she said. "The paramedics say the passenger is stable, largely thanks to the nurse's quick action and your ability to open that kit." Darius bowed his head modestly. "I'm just glad he's okay. But can you tell me why my code worked? I don't understand." Linda looked uneasy. "We aren't entirely sure. The Allen Foundation has a special arrangement with multiple airlines for their leadership fellows, something about ensuring their scholars can access high-level resources if traveling on official business. Honestly, it's above my pay grade. But it came in handy today." He exhaled, puzzling it out. That philanthropic group must have some extraordinary connections. He recalled reading that the Allen Foundation was funded by a tech mogul known for combining philanthropy with advanced logistical solutions, apparently that extended even to airline partnerships. Linda continued, "We'd like to apologize on behalf of American Airlines for the way you were treated earlier. The passenger who caused that ruckus has been blacklisted until further investigation. Also, we'd like to offer you an official upgrade voucher for future travel, plus lounge access whenever you fly with us." Darius appreciated the gesture, but it didn't erase the sting of the morning's events. "Thank you, that's kind. But I hope you'll also address the possibility of bias and unfair treatment." She nodded gravely. "We take that very seriously. Please rest assured we'll be reviewing everything." They exchanged a few more pleasantries before Darius reboarded, passing the paramedics who were just finishing their checks. Soon the captain received clearance to continue the flight. The plane pushed back again, its second departure of the day. Climbing once more into the sky, the plane found a stable cruising altitude. Passengers tried to relax, many ordering stiff drinks to calm their nerves. Darius, however, was still too wound up. He fiddled with his phone, reading an email from the scholarship coordinator that explained the seat arrangement and the special privileges it occasionally included. He'd never heard of a scholarship providing some type of clearance code, but that had just saved a life. Across the aisle, a woman who introduced herself as Monica whispered, "You did great today, young man." Darius gave her a grateful smile. "It was all the nurses doing. I just opened a box." Monica nodded. "Still, you stayed calm under pressure. That's something to be proud of." Others in first class chimed in with similar sentiments, a far cry from the scornful stares earlier. One older gentleman even apologized on behalf of fools who can't see beyond their own noses, clearly referencing the earlier fiasco. Christina returned to offer warm towels and dinner menus. "We'll resume normal service," she said with a genuine smile. "You've earned a glass of champagne, Mr. Jackson, if you'd like one." He politely declined, opting instead for water. Despite everything, he wanted to keep a clear head. Still, relief coursed through him that at least the hostility had subsided, replaced by gratitude and a sense of communal support. How quickly fortunes could reverse. Hours into the flight, the cabin lights dimmed and most passengers settled into personal screens or napped. Darius couldn't sleep. He flicked through a digital magazine, thoughts buzzing. Finally deciding a quick walk might help, he ventured toward the rear of first class, where a curtain separated it from the main cabin. He paused, looking back at the seats. A wave of reflection hit him. If he had not insisted on remaining in first class, if he'd ceded his seat, he might have missed the chance to open that emergency kit in time. Could that have cost the man his life? A flight attendant parted the curtain to pass between cabins, allowing him a glimpse of the coach section. Rows were cramped passengers, dozing with pillows or watching movies on small screens. He remembered his mother's face when she'd told him about the scholarship, tears of joy shining in her eyes. He'd felt both excitement and trepidation at stepping into a world he'd never known. First class, exclusive events, high-level networking. Today had proven that sometimes you belonged exactly where you needed to be, even if others doubted it. He also recognized a deeper truth. The plane needed him, but not for the reasons anyone expected. Prejudice might have tried to shove him out of that seat, but ironically, it was his presence that helped avert a tragedy. The realization stirred a swell of bittersweet triumph within him. Karma, in its mysterious way, had a sense of poetic justice. As the flight neared Seattle, the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. Mount Rainier appeared in the distance, a majestic sentinel presiding over the city. The captain announced an on-time arrival, despite the day's detours, thanks to making up lost time in the air. Christina and the other flight attendants made their final pass through the cabin. People gathered their belongings, exchanged business cards, or shared stories of what they'd just experienced. When the wheels finally touched down at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, applause broke out, rare on flights but reflective of the emotional roller coaster the passengers had endured. Darius felt a surge of relief and accomplishment. As they taxied to the gate, Christina leaned over to Darius. "We want to thank you again. We have a wheelchair and paramedics waiting if you need to talk to them, but I think you're okay." She smiled. "We'd love to compensate you further, or at least invite you back to the lounge if you have any layover time." He returned her smile. "I appreciate it. I have a mentorship program waiting for me in the arrivals area. But thank you." The aircraft door opened, and passengers began filing out. Many paused near Darius's seat to shake his hand or express gratitude. One by one, they disappeared into the jetway, carrying with them the story of a day they'd never forget. The jetway was bustling, but a man in a neat button-down and a Morehouse lanyard stood near the exit, holding a sign that read, "Darius Jackson. Welcome to Seattle." He greeted Darius with a broad grin. "We heard about the diversion and the medical emergency. Are you all right?" Darius nodded, still overwhelmed by everything. "I'm okay. It's been a long day." "Well, we're glad you're here," the man said, offering a handshake. "My name's James. I'm one of the program coordinators. Let's get you settled. You'll have dinner with the rest of the cohort tonight." They made their way to the baggage claim, where to Darius's surprise, a small group of scholarship recipients waited. When they spotted him, they rushed over with cheers and hugs, one of them exclaiming, "We saw the news about a medical emergency on your flight. Was that you?" Darius shrugged modestly. "A passenger had a medical issue. I just helped unlock a kit, that's all." But in their eyes, he was already a hero. They bombarded him with questions, but all he could think about was how surreal the entire day had been. A swirl of relief, pride, and lingering tension simmered inside him. He wanted a shower, a warm meal, and a moment to process everything. Days later, the story of Flight AA-1329 went semi-viral on social media. Several passengers who had witnessed the confrontation posted about how a black college student was nearly kicked out of first class, only for the plane to need him to save another passenger's life. The irony resonated with countless people. It wasn't long before news outlets picked it up, and Darius found himself fielding interview requests. Meanwhile, American Airlines launched an internal investigation. They discovered that the initial passenger, Mr. Executive Platinum, had a history of harassing other travelers. His threats to sue the airline evaporated once they reviewed footage of his tirade, revealing blatant discriminatory remarks. He was banned from the airline, his miles revoked, a hard dose of karma for a man who thought his status made him invincible. In another twist, the passenger who suffered a heart attack reached out to Darius through the airline's passenger contact system. He expressed immense gratitude, explaining how the medication from that locked kit had stabilizing effects until they could get to the hospital. He joked that when he recovered, he'd donate to Morehouse College in Darius's honor, calling it the least I can do to thank the young man who had the key to my survival. The final note of karma struck when the story reached the attention of the Allen Foundation's leadership. They released a statement applauding Darius for his poise and quick thinking, reaffirming their mission to empower talented individuals who might otherwise face barriers. More resources were pledged to expand the scholarship program, transforming adversity into opportunity for future scholars. A week after arriving in Seattle, Darius had fully immersed himself in the mentorship program. He met executives from Microsoft, Boeing, and other tech giants, forging connections that could shape his future. During a final banquet, he was asked to give a short speech about his experiences. Nervously, he stepped up to the podium. He cleared his throat, heart pounding as he surveyed the faces before him. Industry leaders, fellow scholars, mentors. "I learned a valuable lesson on my flight here," he began, voice steady. "Sometimes life puts you exactly where you need to be. People may question whether you belong, but it's often at those moments you discover just how essential you are. We all have purpose, value, and the power to make a difference, even if it's as simple as opening the door, or in my case, unlocking a kit. Don't let anyone tell you you're not worthy of your seat, wherever that seat may be." He finished to a standing ovation, tears glistening in several eyes, including his own. The program director leaned in to whisper, "I hope you realize this is just the beginning for you, Darius." In the years that followed, Darius soared to remarkable heights. He graduated from Morehouse with honors, completed prestigious internships, and launched a startup dedicated to leveraging technology for social good. Yet whenever he reflected on his journey, he always remembered the day he boarded an American Airlines flight bound for Seattle, only to confront bias, bureaucracy, and a life-or-death emergency at 30,000 feet. That flight tested his patience, his resolve, and his belief in himself. It also showed him that true belonging cannot be dictated by seat assignments or social status, but by one's willingness to do good in the face of adversity. And in that sense, Darius Jackson would forever remain a shining example of how sometimes destiny places us exactly where we need to be, even if others don't yet see it. Through tumultuous twists, moments of near tragedy, and a triumphant stand against prejudice, Darius Jackson's journey reminds us that every seat we occupy in life is earned, not given, and that our potential to help others can emerge in the unlikeliest of circumstances. From enduring blatant discrimination to playing a crucial role in saving a life, Darius's resilience and quick thinking proved that we are all more than the labels imposed upon us. Sometimes those who appear the least important in society turn out to be the ones everyone desperately needs. If this story moved you, if it sparked reflection, or if it reminded you to believe in your inherent worth, I invite you to support this channel. Like this video to show encouragement. Share it with friends who need a reminder of how destiny works in surprising ways, and subscribe for more inspiring narratives that celebrate bravery and the power of unity. Your support keeps these stories alive,